It's caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the
What's up, guys? Lance, the Obscure Movie Guy, coming to you once again with another fun-filled, fact-filled video that you probably won't care about, but we're going to do it anyways, trying to change the world one post at a time. And as you can tell from my hat and my resting Grinch face t-shirt, it is the holiday season, and this is as bad as holly jolly as I'm going to get. That being said, it's time for our second annual Seasons Beatings, where we take a look at 3 obscure movies, Christmas movies that are of the action/horror/comedy variety, and not your typical Christmas movie. Last year we talked about Jack Frost. No, I'm not talking about the one that stars Michael Keaton. I'm talking about the one that stars Shannon Elizabeth in her first theatrical role, where she gets murdered by a murderous snowman. We also talked about Fat Man last year, starring Mel Gibson and Walton Goggins. And we also talked about Santa's Sleigh, that's S-L-A-Y, starring Bill Goldberg as Santa, slaying people with a slew of cameos. So this year we're going to talk about 3 more crazy Christmas movies that do not really necessarily involve the Christmas spirit. And the first one we're going to talk about is also going to be the most popular one. Most people have probably already seen this one, but if you haven't, you should definitely check it out. First off, we're going to kick it off with 2022's Violent Night. Violent Night is a 2022 American Christmas action comedy film directed by Tommy Wirkola and written by Pat Casey and Josh Miller. It follows Santa Claus, played by David Harbour, as he fights off mercenaries who have taken a wealthy family hostage in their own home. The film also stars John Leguizamo, Beverly D'Angelo, Alex Hassel, and Cam Giganette. Violent Night had its world premiere at the New York Comic Con on October 7th, 2022, and Universal Pictures released the film in theaters in the United States on December 2nd, 2022. The film received generally positive reviews from critics and grossed $76.6 million worldwide against a $20 million budget. Currently, there is a sequel in development. If you haven't seen Violent Night, I highly recommend it. It is definitely worth the watch. Production value, obviously very good, being backed by Universal Pictures and some big production companies with a big budget of $20 million. Now, I use that loosely. $20 million doesn't go very far these days. Regardless, a $20 million budget. It made $76 million at the box office, and it is a damn good time. Here you have Santa Claus, an extraordinary person put into an extraordinary situation, but, you could almost put this as, this is Santa Claus's version of Die Hard. He's put in a situation that he wasn't planning on being in, but still has to be the hero and come out on top. Now, there were talks in January of this year that they were going to do a sequel, and hopefully that was going to revolve more around not only Santa Claus himself, but they were also talking about bringing in Santa Claus's wife, Mrs. Claus, along with the elves and the factory in some way, shape, or form. David Harbour expressed interest in having Charlize Theron play Mrs. Santa Claus, so unfortunately, since that announcement, there hasn't really been anything as far as any announcement as when filming would start, what the storyline would be, when or where it would take place. So we're kind of at a standstill with it just being in the developmental stage. But nonetheless, check it out. It is a damn good time. And if you've already seen it, watch it again because it's that freaking fun. So the next one I want to talk about is a bit of a horror cult classic and probably kicked off the slasher film genre as far as horror is concerned. So years before John Carpenter's Halloween came out, we had 1974's Black Christmas. Black Christmas, originally titled Silent Night, Evil Night in the United States and retitled Stranger in the House on television screenings, is a 1974 Canadian slasher film produced and directed by Bob Clark and written by A. Roy Moore. It stars Olivia Hussey, Keir Dullea, Margot Kidder, Andrea Martin, Lynn Griffin, and John Saxon. The story follows a group of sorority sisters who receive threatening phone calls and are eventually stalked and murdered by a deranged killer during the Christmas season. Inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, and a series of murders that took place in Westmount neighborhood of Montreal, Quebec, Moore wrote the screenplay under the title of Stop Me. The filmmakers made numerous alterations to the script, primarily the shifting to a university setting with young adult characters. It was shot in Toronto in 1974 on an estimated budget of $686,000 and was distributed in North America by Warner Brothers. So Black Christmas gave us one of horror film's greatest horror tropes of all time, and that is the infamous phone call with some psycho or possibly nobody on the other end of the line. As I said earlier, that this could be dated back to the urban legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs, which is a story most of us heard as a kid, but never really saw anything as far as a theatrical release or a short story or something like that. I know myself, I heard it when I was in elementary school, and it probably dates back almost to the 50s and maybe even 60s. But it is a horror trope that we can find in a lot of different movies. When a Stranger Calls, When a Stranger Calls Again from 1993, When a Killer Calls from 2006. You even see it in the beginning of Scream 1, where the killer calls Drew Barrymore before killing her. So one of the great horror tropes of all time came from this movie based off of an urban legend and some possibly real serial killer issues in Montreal, Quebec, back in the 70s. That being said, it also gave John Carpenter one of his best things that he ever did for Halloween, and that is in the opening scene of Black Christmas, you have a point of view camera shot from the killer with the breathing, the stalking, the looking through the windows, and it worked very well in the movie. John Carpenter made it more mainstream with Halloween in 1978. However, if you are not a horror person, you can still get a good kick out of this film. The killings in this film are not necessarily too graphic. The director wanted it to be more of a psychological thriller, even though a lot of people have kind of classified it as a slasher flick. But that being said, if you take a look at Halloween from 1978, even though it's kind of considered a slasher flick, there's not necessarily, well, actually, there's hardly any blood in that movie at all. In fact, the only blood you see in Halloween is when Laurie gets her arm cut. Other than that, yeah, somebody's getting stabbed, but it's not necessarily graphic or violent because you're not really seeing a whole lot of blood splatter everywhere. It wasn't until the 80s when Jason took all that to the next level, and that's when slasher flicks became very graphic. That being said, check out Black Christmas if you're a horror fan, if you're a Christmas fan. It falls in both categories, and it's a damn good time. Now, the last movie I want to talk about is actually really fun, and it kind of revolves around this guy, 2022's horror slasher comedy parody, The Mean One. The Mean One is a 2022 American black comedy Christmas horror film directed by Stephen LaMorte and written by Flip and Finn Cobbler. The film parodies Dr. Seuss's 1957 children's book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, as a horror retelling that stars David Howard Thornton as the titular character. It also stars Crystal Martin, Chase Mullins, John Bingham, Eric Baker, Flip Cobbler, and Amy Schumacher in supporting roles. The story follows a young woman as she attempts to defend her childhood town from a green-skinned creature who goes on a murderous rampage during the holiday season. The film was announced in October 7th of 2022 by XYZ Films, who collaborated with a Sleight of Hand Productions, Amy Rose Productions, and Cali Pictures on its production. Because it is unauthorized, the film never uses actual language from the original book or the cartoon, therefore avoiding any legal issues.
The magic of Christmas is here. The streets are singing with cheer. Snowflakes are...
So, I'm going to be honest with you, this movie is freaking brilliant and hilarious at the same time. Now, it's got really low Metascores on IMDb, scoring like 3.7 out of 10 as far as the film rating goes, and I think that's because people don't necessarily understand the brilliancy behind how well this was actually written. You have to remember that The Grinch, this was basically an unauthorized retelling of the story. Therefore, to avoid any type of litigation from Dr. Seuss or any other like entities that, like Illumination, who did the animated version, or I think it was Universal or Warner Brothers that did the Jim Carrey version, to avoid any type of litigation with the whole Dr. Seuss thing, they never actually refer to the Grinch as the Grinch, even though we all know it is the Grinch. He is just referred to as the Mean One. Looks like the Grinch, talks like the Grinch, must be the Grinch. However, it revolves around Cindy You-Know-Who lives in Newville, again, avoiding any type of litigation. And the beauty of this movie is that not only is it a parody of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas itself, But you can also see the parodies that it is of cheesy Christmas movies. This movie has some very basic dialogue, some very predictable dialogue, and some cheesy deaths. And a lot of that is all a parody of something else. How many crappy Hallmark or Netflix movies do you gotta watch for it to all be the same goddamn storyline? And herein lies the fact with this as well. You have the chick going back home. You know, in this case, it's to face her fears, but realistically, in most Christmas movies, she's going back home for some trumped up reason. Big city girl, goes back to Podunk Town, but in this case, she's getting vengeance, not finding love. So it is kind of hilarious that this movie is a parody of not just Dr. Seuss, but multiple Christmas movies and multiple horror movies at the same time. And it should also be noted that even though this is a B-grade movie, there are no big-name actors in this. However, the mean one is played by one David Howard Thornton. And if you're not familiar with who that guy is, it's him. Art the Clown. David Howard Thornton is Art the Clown. And coincidentally, Terrifier 3, which will be coming out next year, is also going to be a Christmas movie. So back-to-back Christmas movies, well, almost back-to-back Christmas movies, starring David Howard Thornton from the Terrifier series. He also played the mean one. I also want to give a shout out to Crystal Martin, who plays the lead actress in this movie. Not only did she do a pretty good job of acting, but she's also a certifiable badass in real life. She is a martial artist, a stunt woman, a stunt coordinator, did all of her own stunts in this movie, along with the acting. She's also stunt doubled for Ronda Rousey on a couple of occasions in her movies and TV shows that she's been on. She also looks like a combination of Jessica Biel and Ronda Rousey, so not bad. And again, certifiable badass. So check this movie out. It is a good time. Take it for what it's worth. It's only 90 minutes long. By no means is it great, but if you go into the mindset that this is a parody of not just The Grinch, but other terrible Christmas movies, so you're going to run into a lot of the same cheeseball tropes from Christmas movies and also cheeseball tropes from other horror movies, it is actually pretty well written, and it is kind of hilarious at the same time. So that is going to do it for this year's edition of Seasons Beatings. Be sure to check out last year's video. I'll be sure to post that up on my Facebook page as well. You can check me out here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and comment to the channel. Share the video with your friends and family. Check me out on Facebook. And I will see you guys very soon in the next video.